it's not, so we'll see. Zeke's got it. There we go. Cool. All right, so talking about thriving in the kingdom of God, focusing in this morning on living free. There's a lot of aspects of living free, like that could be probably a year-long series of messages to really hone in on living free. There's so many different ways that we can find ourselves in bondage. Where I want to hone in on this morning is, I guess you could say, discerning truth. I'm using John chapter 8, verse 32 as the foundation scripture. It says, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And I understand that that's, Jesus is the way, he is the truth and the life. So I understand that that's talking about like knowing Jesus. But then there's also a reality that Jesus is truth, and so the more of truth that we can understand, the more of him we understand, and the more freedom that we walk in. And so what prompted this study for me is a phenomenon. I think of it as a phenomenon that I've experienced in my own life in various aspects, and that being relationships primarily, and that's kind of where I want to hone in on. And the phenomenon that I've experienced different times in my life personally, and I've seen others experience it, when you have how would you say, just something unresolved, let's just put it that way. If there's something unresolved in your heart that has to do with another person, maybe it was a close friend and then there was some kind of a falling out and you're not even really sure what happened, you just know it's not the same as it used to be, and that can cause some pain of rejection, that we can feel like there can be some pain that we experience in those types of scenarios. And one thing about life is it just seems like change is inevitable, right? And so as we experience change, that can be painful just in and of itself. And this thing that I want to talk about this morning that I've experienced personally, different times where I've been in one of those seasons, experienced that dynamic with friendships or relationships or whatever you may have, whatever you'd say. There can be some insecurities that form in my own heart, some things that are just unresolved. It's like questions. Trauma is funny, like, and maybe we could call it traumatizing things, but like one way I like to look at that resonates with me, talking about trauma, when you experience something very painful, very negative, more than what you're able to just cope with and understand and deal with at the time, then your brain kind of marks that moment, and there's a part of your subconscious that continually tries to sort that out. It's like, what happened here? That was painful. And so an analogy that I like, that I've heard used that I like, is it's like if you were walking through the forest and you're on a hike one day and you just like fell into a pit, and then you got hurt and somebody came along and helped you out, whatever the case may be. But then there's this part of your brain that's always going to be like, hey, I don't want that to happen again. And it's going to be on the lookout for these pits. And so as you're going through life, you may be hiking in the woods again. It's a little bit the same as that scenario. And you're going to be like, where's the pit? Where's the pit? Looking for it. There's this part of your brain that's trying to sort that out. And that's all subconscious. And I think that this happens, I've experienced this same type of thing in relationships as well, where maybe there was a painful situation, maybe there was a tearing apart or whatever it may be. And there's some just things that are just kind of unresolved. And there's this part of my subconscious that's like, hey, what was that? And then the next time that I encounter that person, the next time that I see them or hear about them or am in the same group of people in the same room as them, then there can start to be some fairly strong feelings that start to well up inside of me concerning that person. And the thing that I call a phenomenon is that I've experienced is there's a tendency for me to feel like whatever I'm feeling, that's coming from that person. So like when I encounter this person, I may feel like, oh wow, like I get this kind of vibe, and it's like, man, they're kind of upset at me. Like I think they're mad at me, or they're frustrated at me, or I'm not, man, they really don't like me. I'm getting this vibe. I'm feeling something. So it's like, man, this person they really don't like me. Something's going on. But and I used to just take that and be like, wow, Paul, that's terrible. And I just kind of cower away, and it's like, well, I can't help what they're feeling. I can't help how they feel toward me. I can't help how they're acting. I mean, man, look at that. They're treating me terrible. And then I've also experienced in my own life where I've interpreted that through a spiritual lens. Sometimes we get our spiritual lens on. And it's like, man, I'm feeling something. It's like, wow, there must be something dark in the spiritual realm. I'm under attack. There's something going on in the spiritual realm, and this person must really hate me. Maybe they just really don't think of me as a brother in the Lord. Maybe they're praying against me. And then I think, oh, I need to stand against that. And what I've come to realize most of those times in my life when I've experienced that thing, and regardless of how you interpret it, whether it be spiritual or physical, most of the time, if I'm willing to stop and be like, okay, how do I feel toward that person? Like, what's in my heart toward them? Like, I'm feeling these things, and I right away assume that it's coming from them, right? It's like, oh, there's some tension. They must be tense with me. Oh, I feel some hatred. They must hate me. But if I stop and I just say, wait a minute here, I'm feeling something. What is it? Then I can be like, oh, wow, you know what? Down in my heart somewhere, there's some insecurity here. Down in my heart somewhere, there's some feelings of tension because of the status of this relationship, because of how things went. Down in my heart somewhere, there's some feelings of rejection. Maybe there's some feelings of frustration. But it's in my heart that those things reside. And so then I can think, well, then I can take care of that, right? I can't fix how you're feeling. I can't fix what you're doing or what's going on in your heart. But my heart, I can. I can take that to the Lord and be like, hey, Lord, help me with this. And then I can test it. I can be like, well, I'm feeling some tension. So is that tension coming from you, or is it coming from me, projecting forward from me? And so then most of the time, if I'm willing to step past that thing, whatever it is, and get out of my comfort zone and approach that person and just have a conversation, most of the time it's like all of those feelings just kind of dissipate and they just kind of melt away. Or certainly they decrease in intensity. And then I find a sense of freedom in my own heart, in my own mind, that I didn't have prior to. So that's kind of that's the thing that I'm wanting to kind of focus on this morning, how we can live free by knowing the truth. And in the truth in this situation, like what I just described to you, would be, hey, there's some unresolved things in my own heart that I can take to the Lord and that He can heal. It's like, I mean, if God is for me, who can be against me? Like, all of our insecurities, all of our feelings of fear, maybe from rejection or whatever, like all of those things really in the presence of God they're just really irrelevant, right? Like He's bigger than all of that. And so then if I that's the truth that I can walk in, that brings a great sense of freedom. And that's what I want to hone in on, and that's kind of, I shared a little bit of that with Aaron. We were talking, it's probably, 6 weeks ago, this started to stir in my heart. And as I knew had the opportunity to share a message again, I felt like, that's what I want to hone in on. And so she's really good with research. Aaron is actually really good with like compiling data. I tend to get like hyper focused on one thing, and then by the time I realize it, I'm so far down this rabbit trail that I've lost focus of whatever the original intent was. So I asked her, I said, honey, would you help me study a little bit for this message? And so I just want to give credit to where credit is due. She did that and did it very well, so thank you. And so I want to go through some of these things that we learned. And one of the things that was fascinating to me, she said, well, hey, there's actually a name for that thing that you're experiencing. And I said, oh, interesting. And it's called cognitive distortions. And it's when our brains distort reality. We believe something that isn't actually true, but we believe it because of cognitive distortions. And there's a list of them that I want to kind of go through this morning. But first, before we jump into that, where were we at here? I'm sorry, did that thing go wild while I was talking? No? It just went wild on here? Okay. All right. If it starts getting out of hand, just tell me and I'll rein it in. All right, so I want to look at 2 Corinthians, some more scripture here as we get into this. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 3. It says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. All right, so it's talking pretty clearly, it looks to me like it's talking about what we would consider spiritual warfare, right? So we're going to learn how to engage in spiritual warfare, because I don't think he was talking about weapons that are divinely powerful for going and literally tearing down fortresses. I think it's pretty clear. It says the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. So spiritual warfare here, okay. So what are we doing? How are we accomplishing that? It says we are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. And we're taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. That was incredible to me to read that and realize how much spiritual warfare comes down to understanding truth and not allowing ourselves to be carried away with speculations and taking thoughts captive and bringing them to the obedience of what? It doesn't say the mighty supernatural power. It says every lofty thing that's raised up against the knowledge of God. So there is a thing here that is beneficial to us to have a proper understanding of reality. Like if our knowledge is warped through cognitive distortions, if we have a belief system that is not an accurate representation of reality, then we're going to be opening up the door for all sorts of struggles and things in our lives that's unnecessary. And if we want to go accomplish some spiritual warfare and realize the powerful presence of the Lord and the weapons that we have to bring destruction to the fortresses of the enemy, then we can start by not speculating. We can start by having a good understanding of truth. And we can start by taking our thoughts captive and bringing them into submission to the obedience of Christ. That was interesting to me. Proverbs 14:10 says, the heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. So when in that moment, if I feel like I'm in the presence of somebody and I feel some tension and I think, oh, this person is angry at me, I know they hate me, Well, you know what? I don't know that, because that's an issue of going on in their heart. The heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. That I think we can take from that an understanding that I'm not going to know what's going on in your heart just by default. Like, maybe you'll tell me, maybe you'll be honest with me, but I'm not going to feel what you're feeling. Most of the time, I'm going to feel what I'm feeling. All right, so I want to look at this little representation just to kind of give us an understanding of what I think happens a lot of times. So the subconscious mind I've put in the shape of a heart, just because a lot of times, well, the Bible refers to it, it says the heart knows its own bitterness. That's not talking about like our physical heart that pumps blood. What it's talking about, I believe, is our subconscious mind. And those things, those hurts and those bitternesses that we've experienced, that's stored away in our heart, in our subconscious mind. All right, so there's that. And then our conscious mind, that's what you're thinking of. Like, if I raise my hand like this, that started in my brain. My brain sent a signal, and for whatever reason, I guess illustration of how this works, here I am waving my hand, right? That starts in my conscious mind. My conscious mind is telling me to do that. The reason for this illustration is I want to talk about how easy it is to misunderstand feelings that we have and misinterpret them as, oh, this is the Lord speaking to me. Oh, this is coming from, you walk into a room, maybe you feel some tension and you're like, oh, wow, Holy Spirit just revealed to me that this person hates me. Maybe he did. But a lot of the times, I want to look at this just to understand how this can happen a lot of times. So I believe more than likely, in the beginning, when God created man and everything was good and perfect, I think probably that was a one-way street, right? That line going up top from our subconscious mind into our conscious mind, and then there's that route that goes back into our subconscious mind. I think that route on the bottom, I don't think would have, this is just my opinion, I don't think that would have existed in the beginning. I think when God created us, he had access to our hearts, right? And so whatever was good and pure and lovely, like whatever was in our hearts was just straight from the Lord. It was just, it was there. And then it goes into your conscious mind, and then that's what you go and do, right? And when we chose the knowledge of good and evil, and who knows, I'm not trying to make a message out of this. That's just, with some surface level thinking, that's what makes sense to me. We chose the knowledge of good and evil, opened up this route. Now we can record things in our own heart. And so what ends up happening, a lot of times I think, is you get hurt, you get offended, there's some unresolved struggles that happen to you. It's like, ouch. Well, then my brain's got to process that. It's like, well, that gets stored, that experience gets stored in my subconscious mind. And there it dwells until I encounter something again. Maybe you see this person or whatever it was, the situation. Then all of a sudden, your subconscious mind feeds back into your mind these feelings. It's like, hey, there's something going on here. Well, that's coming from the same route as what the Holy Spirit, like the Lord speaks to our hearts directly. And then it feeds into our minds, into our conscious mind. And so it kind of takes the same route. And again, this is just my theory. But that's why I think that it's easy sometimes to misinterpret things, to feel like, oh, this is the Lord leading me to do this thing, or this is the Lord, the Lord spoke to me and said, this person hates me, I need to run and flee. Well, maybe it's just your own past experience that's telling you that. And it's coming through the same pipeline, and so it can feel the same way. So that's not a admonition for you to reject the voice of the Lord. Or like when you feel something enter your mind that you're like, where did that come from? I want to encourage you to learn to listen to the voice of the Lord and be sensitive to that. Like, that's very necessary, positive thing. But I just want to, and this is just to encourage you to be careful, to understand that not everything that enters your conscious mind sort of out of the blue is necessarily from the Lord. Like, sometimes that's just your past traumas and your past hurts and your unresolved things. So that's the point of this. All right, so let's move on. All right, so cognitive distortions, what are they? Cognitive distortions can be defined as irrational thoughts that may increase negative emotions and cause stress or anxiety. They convince our minds what we're thinking is true despite evidence. So if you're believing something, if you think something is true and it's actually not, then you're not knowing the truth and you're not living in freedom, right? All right, so let's look at a few of these, what they call cognitive distortions that we often see, just things to watch out for. So one of them is catastrophizing, which is seeing only the worst possible outcomes of a situation. These are things that you may have a tendency to do. I know I can identify with some of these things as I went through them studying. Here's an example. You could say, well, if I admit that I don't know something in a group of friends, then they're going to think I'm stupid or that I won't fit in. And you're just going to catastrophize. You're just going to assume that. And that may be the case. Probably not if they're actually friends, but like, that may be the case, but it's not necessarily the case. It very likely could be the case that if you admit something, somebody's talking and you're like, well, man, I don't even have any idea what you're talking about. It may be the case that 80% of everybody else in that group has no idea what that person's talking about, and by you being willing to say, hey, I don't even understand what you're saying, like, explain this to me. Well, you have an opportunity to learn, but it also may be the case that everybody else has an opportunity to learn. So it's not always going to be the worst case scenario. So if you're looking at a situation and you feel like, this is bad, I just know it's going to be bad, there's no other option. Just stop and just think, well, maybe, am I catastrophizing here? Is there other options? A lot of times there are. All right, moving on. This is one that I have had to watch out for in my own life a lot. All or nothing thinking, which is only thinking in extremes and being unable to see a middle ground. Example of that, you could say, well, I have to be perfect or I'm a complete failure. And that's actually not true. There is middle ground. And there are times, again, I already said that this is one that I have to watch out for my own life. So, like, I have an appreciation for right and wrong. I do. And I have an appreciation for scenarios, well, like the Lord, he said that I would rather you be hot or cold, but not lukewarm, because the lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. So there's certainly situations where this is the case. It's like all or nothing. There's no middle ground. But there's also a lot of situations where that's not the case. And if you're in a habit of thinking with this mindset, you may get yourself in trouble, and you may miss out on some truth in life. You may misinterpret situations. So just be careful of that one. All or nothing thinking. All right, here's another one they call a mental filter. When a person focuses only on the negatives or positives of a situation and filters out all the opposing aspects, they will magnify those details and dwell on those feelings. So an example of if you had like a positive filter in a situation where you're not looking for reality, your filter is like only seeing good, you could be like, well, I really like this new phone, car, truck, tool, pot and pan, whatever. I'm trying to think of something that would relate to the ladies, whatever it may be. I'm sorry, ladies probably don't like pots and pans. That's why I left it blank, and I probably should have. All right. Can we back up on that recording, just cut that out? No. All right, so it could be like, I really like this new, whatever it is, you fill in the blank, I won't bother trying. And then everything about it is perfect. There's no reason that I shouldn't just buy it right now. Have you ever experienced that? Like I have. When you're in a situation, you're like, oh, this truck is perfect. Like, man, this is the greatest truck ever. And you're like, I just need to buy it. And you do. And then you're on your way home and it's like falling apart. And you're like, well, I didn't even see that. And I didn't notice this. And it's like, you know. And if you would have had somebody that was objective with you, probably they could have seen it. Like we can get that mental filter where it's like all we see is the good. But then we can do that with negative filter as well. That's probably more common in relationships. Like maybe somebody genuinely hurt you, like really honestly, genuinely wronged you. How hard is it to recognize little things as being good that person does in the future? Like, isn't it difficult? Like, somebody is just a real jerk one day, and then the next day they go and do something, and you've got this filter on, and you're like, yeah, but I know they meant bad. Like, they bring you a hamburger, and you're like, they probably poisoned it. It's like, I'm not going to eat that thing. Like, you know, we can do that with the negative filter. And so let's be careful in that we don't have these filters that are just clouding our vision and giving us understanding of a situation that is different from the reality of the situation. Knowing the truth. Here's another one. Overgeneralization. It's described as making broad interpretations from a single or few events. This would be another one that really challenged me. Here's an example. I've been betrayed by people in the past, so I can never trust anyone again. Be careful that we don't overgeneralize scenarios and situations in life. Like, maybe there's an investment, you make an investment, and it works out well. And then you're like, well, I know it's going to work out well every time. So you go all in. Well, then it goes bust. Just because it worked once doesn't mean it's going to work every time, right? So let's not just overgeneralize things. Let's be careful. Mind reading is a big one. You assume you know what someone else is thinking without adequate evidence. An example would be, you could say, well, he didn't acknowledge me earlier. He must hate me. I'll say, I was a little distracted this morning when I got to church. I had to get my guitar tuned, and more so than normal, had few things to tie up. So I didn't have the opportunity to just greet people like I sometimes do. So, like, maybe you were here this morning, and you're like, Steve never even said hi to me. Like, wow, he must really be irritated at me. And it's like, well, no, that's not the case. Like, I was just distracted and busy, right? So let's careful not to mind read. Like, I think this goes on a lot of times, especially in close relationships, husband and wife relationships, parents and children, and close friends. Because we know each other well, I think we can tend to forget sometimes that the heart knows its own bitterness and a stranger doesn't share its joy. And I think we can forget sometimes that we don't always have an accurate understanding of what that person is thinking and feeling. And so, just like I said, just challenge you to be curious and let's not mind read. Let's ask questions. Personalization is another cognitive distortion that gets people in trouble. That's when people assign blame to themselves or others for external events that are outside of their control. An example would be, if I would have tried harder, we wouldn't have lost the game. I can do that. I think probably us guys that have been playing softball, you make a mistake and it's like, man, I lost us the game. But if you could go back and watch the video, if there was one, it's like, oh, well, that person made a mistake and they did too, and this one did, and oh, I actually made 10 mistakes. And we tend to when we make a mistake, we tend to just be like, it's all my fault. Like it's this failure was my fault, and that's a lot of times that's not the case. Blaming is another one that involves assigning guilt or responsibility for how we feel to someone else. This is a really big one, and it's really easy to do. Like, example, he makes me feel like a failure. In relationships especially, like when you feel a certain way because of something that someone else did. Maybe, okay, so an example would be when I was young, my siblings used to lock me out of the house sometimes. And I would get so angry. It's like just really made me mad. And who knows why they locked me out of the house, but they would lock me out of the house. And if you would have asked me, like, Steve, why are you angry? I would have told you, well, they've locked me out of the house. It's like, my big brother Randy, he used to be like 3 or 4 times my size. I was just a scrawny little kid, and he was big. And so I just pointed at him, and I would have genuinely believed I was angry, I was feeling mad because what he did. But it's not true. Like, I need to take responsibility for my feelings, right? You need to take responsibility for your feelings. Don't project that blame onto somebody else. I was mad because I was locked out of the house. I'm sure there was a core value being violated in my own heart, in my own life, that made me feel insecure, and that led to me feeling angry. So I could have just more accurately said, well, I'm angry and I'm mad because I'm still a little immature. Like, if you locked me out of the house now, I'd probably be like, all right, I'm going to hang out in the woods for a little, get some quiet. I don't know. No, I actually love being in the house. The kids are great. But I know I really don't feel like I would just get angry and like, I came that close to just throwing a rock through the window to get back in the house. I was just out of my mind angry. In fact, one time I jumped up and punched my brother in the face, literally like jumped, because he's like way taller than me, hit him in the face. Anyway, I landed on the ground and I looked up, it's like, experienced the fear of the Lord in that moment. And, but that scenario wouldn't make me feel angry anymore. And so I think it's fair to say that really wasn't Randy's fault. It really wasn't my siblings' fault, me being angry. That was my own fault. And we tend to do that same thing even now as adults. Something happens and we feel certain feelings and we're like, well, we tend to want to blame whoever was involved in the scenario that maybe lit the fuse, right? But you're responsible for the fuse. All right, let's move on. Watch out for should statements. That's the belief that things should be a certain way. That gets you into trouble. Example can be, it's like, I should be able to do this the first time. I've been doing it for 30 years. I've practiced for hours. I should be able to get it right. It's like, where'd that belief come from? Like, maybe, maybe not. And so be careful with should statements. Be careful with when you feel like, you know what, this shouldn't happen this way. Well, don't just right away just assume that that's true. Like, investigate that. Like, maybe it should happen this way. Maybe the Lord is on the throne. Maybe he has a good purpose for what's going on. And maybe he is allowing some testing and some trials to come your way. And if he is, it's for your own benefit. So Be careful of should statements. Emotional reasoning is another thing to be careful of. As you want to live in truth and experience the freedom of having a good understanding of reality. And emotional reasoning is the assumption that emotions reflect the way things really are. So an example of that would be, you could be like, well, I feel hopeless, therefore there's truly no hope for me. And that can be a real trap. Like, our emotions, that's a whole complex thing that I'd have very little understanding of. Ask my wife. I'm getting better. Emotions are just real hard to figure out. But one thing I do know is they very seldom reflect reality, right? Your emotions are often amped up or down. And so let's not have a lot of emotional reasoning as a practice in our lives when we're processing things, and especially when it comes to relationships and things of that nature. All right, so we're moving on. We're about to bust through this. So I want to just go through this list of a few ways things that you can apply to your own life in how to challenge cognitive distortions. So when your default is all or nothing, like in my case, or when your default is maybe this emotional reasoning or whatever these other things that we've talked about this morning, then it takes a process to insulate yourself from that negative default. And here's a list of things you can do. One thing would be just stop and think, okay, what would Jesus think? Like if you're standing in a room and you're like, ooh, I know that I feel a vibe, I think that person is angry at me. What would Jesus think? Like, how would he process that situation? That's a good question to ask yourself. Another one is, how do I know if this thought is accurate? That'll help you identify if it's really emotional based or if there's actual facts. What evidence do I have to support this thought or belief? How can I test my assumptions or beliefs to find out if they are accurate? This is a big one. Do I have a trusted friend who I can check out these thoughts with? If you're going to do something that's contrary to the norm, it's good to, because you're feeling like this is what the Lord is leading me to do. Do it, like that's good. But it's also good to have a trusted friend, to have somebody in your life that you can just bounce things off of. And at the end of the day, you're responsible to do what the Lord puts in your heart, but it just can really help if there's some people in your life that you trust, that you can be like, hey, what do you think about this? What's your thoughts? Maybe they'll shed some light into the situation that you did not see yourself. Very important. You can ask yourself, is this thought helpful? If it's not, just throw it out. Like, there's a lot of things that aren't worth trying to figure out. Are there other ways that I can think about this situation? Am I blaming myself or others unnecessarily? What or who else contributed to this situation? Is it really in my control? Am I overgeneralizing? Am I making assumptions? What would I say to a friend in this situation? That's a good one. A lot of times we tend to be really hard on ourselves, and it's good just to step back and be like, hey, what would be my advice to a friend in this situation? Another one is, are there alternative possibilities? I've experienced this a lot of times in life when I'm like, there's two options, and neither one of them are going to work. Like, I know neither one of them are good, but there's just two options. And then Aaron or somebody else will be like, well, but what about this? It's like, oh, there is actually 10 options and there's 6 good ones. And I just somehow didn't see them. So really stop and back up and look. Are there alternative possibilities? Am I holding myself to an unreasonable or double standard? Are there exceptions to these absolutes? Always and never. And then I think the last one on the list here is, am I making this personal when it isn't? Personalizing things can be a real detriment. So in closing, let's look at Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 through 4. It says, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. How many times in that situation, relationships especially, you feel this tension or this vibe, and you're like, man, I'm this person, whatever. How many times, if you step back and be honest, is your focus on yourself? It's like, how can I protect myself? Like, what is best for me? And I think if we can turn our focus external, that's like a real good step in the right direction to being able to live in freedom, to live free, to live in the light of truth. Humility of mind. Regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. So then that looks like, well, I'm not sure what you're thinking or feeling. I'm not sure what's going on. And I care about you, so I'm going to come to you and ask. I'm going to come to you and give you opportunity to share and to speak into this situation. And I'm going to give you that respect and that opportunity because I, love you and appreciate you, and I know that I don't know it all myself. And that coupled with the beginning scripture, knowing the truth and the truth will make you free, I think those two coupled together with everything in between, I think can make a big difference in how we process relationships and how we process life in a healthy way. So that concludes my message for this morning. We do have communion, though, that we want to take. Julie prepared for us, and this is the first Sunday of the month. So I guess if I can get some volunteers, a couple of the young guys.